Hey everybody, it's Papa Wiggs and Wiggs here. Continuing our rankings discussion, we're jumping into wide receivers. So, unlike some of the other places, we decided to go and rank 80 wide receivers because in a 12-man league, it only makes sense. Most people, are going to draft anywhere between 5 and 7 receivers, wouldn't you say,
Yeah.
Wiggs? So, I mean, when you think about it that way, you're gonna. I mean, to draft that many receivers, you're looking at anywhere between 60 and 84 players. So we kind of did a happy medium. If it was Wiggs's choice, he probably would have did 100. But
Oh, 100%.
so let's jump on in.
Start things on off here with DJ Chark of the Chargers.
Yeah. So my quick review on him, Shark. He's shown spurts. But he's kind of a traveling wide receiver. I think his best year was like his sophomore season. He had over 1,000 yards, 100 or on 118 targets and 73 receptions. He's really the wide receiver three with the Chargers. To me, um, he's a guy that if you don't have any other options, you can draft. But he's certainly really only going to be a plug and play in PPR fantasy if there's injuries involved. I don't really expect a lot of the receivers on the Chargers team to light it up this year, and I believe McConkey and Palmer are probably going to get the majority of the targets there. So, Wiggs, what do you want? Anything to add?
Yeah, he's kind of in the mix there, being that I would say 4 or 5 receiver on the team. I think Brenden Rice, Palmer, and McConkey will be like the core three, but Justin Herbert's going to spread the ball around like he typically does, and he's going to find at least Chark and his other receiver there in Johnston a decent amount here, so not too bad at depth, and you can really kind of pick up either of those guys later on.
I do find it interesting that they have him uh, uh, higher on the depth chart than Quentin Johnston. Uh, I still think Johnston's got a lot of talent, um, but I know he's been struggling, so we'll have to wait and see.
But on from that, I believe that is Marvin Mims.
Yeah, so Mims, I like Marvin Mims. He's a wide receiver three listed on their depth chart, uh, but um, he's also I believe they had him as a punt returner last year as well. Uh, he didn't light up the world last year, but he also wasn't given a lot of opportunities. He only had 33 targets, but he took advantage of those targets. He averaged over 11 yards of reception. Um, I think that he's a deep. I would consider him a deep sleeper. From my end of things, he's one of those guys that, depending on how Sutton and the other receivers are, and if they stay healthy, because Denver's had issues
Yeah.
with that, he could jump up the chart. But I think he's got a lot of talent, and I think Sean Payton has said and stuff that I've seen that he feels that Mims is gonna have a breakout year.
I could totally see him having a breakout year. Any of the receivers really on this Denver offense, I find hard to rank just because I'm not sold on any of their quarterbacks, which may not be like the greatest of arguments there, but I don't know. It's hard to judge with, Sutton probably being the clear cut one guy if he can stay healthy. But then after that, you have a mix of Josh Reynolds, Marvin Mims, Tim Patrick if he can stay healthy. Like, kind of all over the place. And that's the only reason I ranked him so low is just because I don't know what he's really going to do in this offense this
He's
year.
got a lot of talent though, so keep an eye open from him. He's definitely a draftable type guy.
Yeah, and you can draft him late and just have him on your bench. Next thing you know, he can pop off. He could be like Puka Nakua of last year and go unnoticed and then kind of just, pop off a little bit. Van Jefferson of the Steelers.
Yeah, so Jefferson, he was with LA, then Atlanta. He had one really good year with LA, kind of sophomore season where he had 50 receptions and 800 yards. I'll be honest with you. I think Jefferson isn't going to light the world on fire. Again, he's definitely someone that could jump up the chart if somebody gets injured. On the Chargers team, there's been a lot of talk about Roman Wilson, who's their rookie. They also, they obviously got Pickens, but Calvin Austin to me is actually someone that could, um, be someone to watch for outside of Jefferson. And then they got Quez Watkins too, who's another one that is an interesting type one. So I think Jefferson has talent, but I had him ranked below Mims because I'm really higher on Mims than I am Jefferson. So it'll just be interesting to see. But he's nothing more than a late round pick. Um, in case you need, for injury replacement, if you get to that point. But he's definitely a very late round pick.
Yeah, for me, he'd be someone like I'd pick up with like my last pick, maybe in the draft, or even someone I'd pick up after the draft's concluded. If you have like someone who's going into the season hurt, you can just pick them up and throw them on your bench once you put your player on IR. That's the only way I'd pick them up at least. And now with talks of Brandon Ayuk going over to the Steelers, you never know where he'll be really on that depth chart.
Yeah, and they talked about that. They've kind of debunked that a little bit now too. I just noticed just before we jumped on Wiggs, so I don't know if that'll happen or not. But there has been chatter about that, so it'll be interesting to
Yeah.
see what goes on. But yeah, I think with the other guys on this roster though, that Jefferson's going to get lost in the numbers.
Yeah, he's going to be a wide receiver 3 or 4, and it's not going to be like a crazy impact unless someone gets hurt, like you said.
Right.
Moving on, Noah Brown of the Texans.
Noah Brown, he didn't do crazy bad last year. I mean, he had 55 targets on 33 receptions for a little over 560 yards. Uh, I'll be honest with you. He's again another guy just similar to Jefferson. I think he's going to get lost in the numbers. There's a lot of teams waiting to see who the Texans are going to cut at wide receiver. To be quite honest with you, because they got Nico Collins, Stefon Diggs, Tank Dell, John Michie, Robert Woods. They got Noah Brown. They've just got such
And they
depth.
signed Ben Skrovrelnek
Yeah.
in the offseason from the Rams, so I could totally see him cutting like 2 guys.
So it wouldn't surprise me if Noah Brown, chances are he's going to make the cut for Texans, but if he doesn't, he's going to end up on another team. Wouldn't surprise me if somebody maybe traded for him if they needed some wide receiver help. I definitely think he has a lot of talent. He was definitely a weapon that they used, and he did a great job filling in when they had injuries last year, right?
Yeah, he had 2 games of like 200 yards or something like that.
So I think that this guy is definitely someone um, that you want to keep an eye on. Prior to Houston, he was with Dallas. He really didn't do much with Dallas. He had one year where, the year before in 2022, where he had, 43 receptions on 555 yards with Dallas. But I could definitely see him, latching on to another team if he doesn't, or getting traded just because of the depth here. So I would, I would just keep my eye on where he ends up and see if he does stay on the Texans, he's definitely just going to be an injury replacement, late round draft pick. If he does get traded or let go and somebody else picks him up, keep an eye on what team he goes to, because he could definitely have an impact on a new team.
Yeah, and I think the reason we had him ranked even in the top 80 here is because CJ Stroud's probably going to have another 4.5K season throwing the ball. So
I think he showed last year that he's definitely got the talent.
Yeah,
I think he just hasn't had the opportunity.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, if Noah Brown gets traded to really any team, like he should be within that top 80 range for sure.
I mean, because if you think about it, he was with Dallas, and Dallas, I mean, he was with Dallas, since 2017 until 2022, but he was kind of lost in the shuffle in Dallas.
Yeah, and they never utilize him. Yeah, they utilize him 1 year and then trade him away or release him. So wouldn't surprise me though if we saw him on another team and he jumped up even further than what we have him on our list.
Yeah.
All right, we got Quentin Johnston of the Chargers. I think we have 5 Chargers in our top 80.
Yeah, and this could change. Obviously, this is going to be a fluid list. It's early on here. The Chargers had high hopes for Johnston last year. He didn't really pan out the way they wanted. He struggled. I heard he's kind of struggling this year. The guy they drafted this year, McConley, is actually, jumped up to the wide receiver 1 on their depth chart. I think Joshua Palmer is definitely going to be over Johnston. And they actually got Chark ranked above Johnston right now too. I heard he's been struggling again. I still think he has talent. I think he needs to find the right place. I don't think the Chargers is the right place.
No.
They say that they're gonna, keep him there. I don't know. Again, if they do keep him there, he is nothing more than. I personally, I think Mims is a better option than him if you're going to draft late round. That's just my opinion, just because we just don't know where he's going to, shake out and stuff. But I'd keep my eyes open because there's going to be a lot of movement with these teams, and depending on how many receivers they keep. If he stays with the Chargers, I think the Chargers are going to be running the ball more than passing. Wouldn't you agree, Wicks? Yeah. So I don't know that he's going to really have much fantasy value unless somebody gets hurt and he has to jump in, or he gets let go or traded to a different team that actually is a better fit for him.
Yeah, see, when I was looking at the depth chart and doing like my rankings, I noticed like I did have 5 of these Chargers receivers on my list, but like part of me has a feeling that like Johnston possibly could get traded because they draft Rice and McConkey, so I don't think they get traded. You just signed Chark in the offseason. Now, unless he completely is just terrible in their camp and everything, maybe he gets cut or something. I don't know. But part of me is just kind of hoping that Johnston gets traded and then utilized in whatever offense he's on. Even if it's as something simple as going to like Cincinnati or something and being the wide receiver 3 there, or some other team that needs like a wide receiver 3, because I could totally see him being like in that 76, 80 range. Not any higher really, but really once you get down here, it's kind of close between everyone, and everyone kind of fluctuates just a little bit.
I had him a little bit higher just because I do think he has some upside with his size, his youth, and I do believe that if he does find the right team, he could turn it around. So,
and part of me has like a feeling that like Chark, Johnston, and Brenden Rice all could have like similar years on that Chargers offense, even if none of them like move to different teams, But yeah,
because he is 6'4", 215 pounds. He's a big receiver, so.
And I mean, he doesn't even need a ton of receptions. It could just be like a few touchdowns here and there that boosts him up to the 76 spot,
Right.
Moving on, Josh Reynolds of the Broncos.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because Josh Reynolds was with Detroit last year. He actually had a pretty decent year considering, the weapons Detroit had. He's actually hasn't been he wasn't terrible in Detroit, and before that he was, okay with the Rams. I think with Detroit he got a little bit better opportunity to showcase his talents. He had 40 receptions for 608 yards and 5 touchdowns. Detroit did find a way to use him. I'll be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if he, given the fact that they do have some younger receivers on that Broncos team, and, I'm not sure where Tim Patrick is going to fall into place, and I know that they got Troy Franklin, higher than him on the depth chart, but Franklin's a rookie. Johnson could leapfrog any of those guys. I think he's definitely a guy you want to keep your eye on. Um, in regards to how things shake out during training camp here with the Broncos, because I think he could be a sneaky uh, type guy that might keep inching his way up the depth chart. In regards to um, the issues that they've had in Denver with the receivers. So at this point, though, again, at this low of the list, is definitely just a bench guy. Keep an eye on him. Definitely wouldn't be a bad guy to draft really late in the round, just given the fact that for some reason the Broncos, they're cursed at wide receiver. They just, the last couple of years, their wide receivers just continually get hurt.
And you look at Josh Reynolds here, and he's only had 2 years where he's missed games. They have been recent years, but other than that, he stays pretty healthy. So I could see him potentially being maybe a wide receiver too on this team and being higher up on the list. But as it sits right now, I kind of have him in that like wide receiver 3-4 role with Marvin Mims. So
yeah, I think it all depends on how Troy Franklin pans out. They drafted Franklin because they drafted Bo Nix, and that Franklin was Bo Nix's target. Um, you know, in college, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
It definitely will be. Got Brenden Rice of the Chargers now.
Yeah, Brenden Rice, he's a rookie. He's coming out of USC. Um, I think he's got, he's definitely got the size at 6'3", 210 pounds. To be quite honest, I'm not expecting too much from Brenden Rice this year. I think Conley is going to be, their guy. And I think Josh Palmer is going to be their other guy. So I really feel like McConley and Palmer are gonna get a lot of the work at receiver. Um, I think Brenden Rice is somebody you want to keep your eye on to see how things develop throughout the season. I definitely think he's going to make the team.
Yeah.
I think he's one of those receivers in this deep receiver class for the draft that you want to keep an eye on later in the season to see how he kind of shakes out in regards to where he fits into the offense. But initially, I don't think he's going to have any really impact. And to me, he's going to be more, again, an injury replacement, borderline draftable guy, just like all these guys right now. Plus the Chargers also got, I think, Hayden Hurst as their tight end.
Yep.
So I just think that, Rice is someone you want to keep an eye on and see how he develops in the offense throughout the year.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to judge where he'll fit in with this offense right now because Ladd McConkey is, like you said, probably their clear-cut one right now with Joshua Palmer, and it's kind of like a fight for that 3 and 4 spot there on that offense between these three. So I think having them all within that 70 to 80 range is kind of nice because we can be more flexible when we go to update this later on.
Right. And who knows? He could bump Quentin Johnston if he shows out in training camp, and Johnston could be out the door.
That is true, and we could see him sitting there like top 60, maybe a little bit better there on this team. So I think he'll definitely outperform DJ Chark. Got Adonai Mitchell of the Colts, rookie.
I'm excited about Adonai Mitchell. I think he's one of the rookies in this draft that is being overlooked. I think he fell into the perfect situation in Indianapolis. I think he's going to be, he's going to be a great complement to Pittman and Downs in Indianapolis. And at some point, I don't think right away, but I think as the season goes along, after game 4, 5, 6, you're going to see Mitchell actually being a bigger part of the offense um, in the Colts. I really like this pick by the Colts. I think that Wiggs and I were talking about them, and I actually kind of agree with Wiggs now after looking at this a little bit more. The Colts actually have a solid wide receiving core. I mean, when you look at Josh Downs and Alec Pierce and Pittman, now you throw in Adonai Mitchell in there. I think this was the perfect situation for him, and I think he's just going to climb um, the rankings. So here's a hot take from Papa Wiggs. If you're looking at receivers later in the draft, check out Adonai Mitchell. Like I said, he's probably not going to pay off for you right away in the draft, right away in the season, early in the season. But I could see him having an impact later in the season. And depending on if there's any injuries, it could be earlier too. So,
yeah, and I think he has a really solid chance of being a wide receiver too. It'll be interesting. I think we could rank him a little bit higher here on the list, but I think we kind of played it more so safe right away just due to the fact that Richardson is more of a mobile quarterback, and you don't know who's that true wide receiver two on that team between Downs and Mitchell, and you still have Pierce in the mix. It's kind of hard to judge all four of those guys.
Actually, I think I ranked him too low on my list, to be quite honest with you. I actually think he's going to have a bigger impact just looking at this than most of the guys that we've already talked about on the other teams. And he's probably going to have a bigger impact than some of the guys that we're going to talk about here in a minute. So I think I probably had him a little bit too low on my list, especially since I've been kind of following the Colts a little bit more here in regards to their training camp. And I like what I see from this kid. I think, like I said, he's my hot take. Don't lose sight of this guy. I think that he's going to have he's definitely going to have an impact this season, probably later in the season. But it could be earlier depending on how they use him.
And the nice thing too, like we might have him ranked a little bit low right now, but keep an eye on our Twitter X, because we are going to be updating it, and we talk more and break it down a little bit better, which you'll see with the quarterbacks here soon. But
and I think with Richardson as his quarterback and the fact that he likes to scramble is going to only help Mitchell as well if he's out on the field, because he might have more opportunities to catch the ball if Richardson's scrambling and
he breaks off his route and finds
breaks
off
his route, yeah. So it'll be interesting.
He's just got to be smart when Richardson gets out of the pocket and scrambles like that. Like there's a lot of good receivers out there that as soon as they see their quarterback out of the pocket, unless it's like a play action type play, they're ready to break their route and find the open hole for their quarterback. So if he can be smart like that, I can definitely see him having a pretty solid year. I think it'll take a few weeks, maybe a month and a half, but he still should be pretty solid throughout the entire season. I was thinking like your 78 looked a little low, but it'll be nice once we reevaluate everything and
yeah. And I think I did my my rankings. We adjusted some of them.
Yeah,
that's one of the guys I might have missed. Same with this guy right here, Dontayvion Wicks. Actually, Wicks had he had 581 yards on 39 receptions last year for Green Bay. He's another young wide receiver. You know what? Listen, Green Bay has got 4 young wide receivers on their team right now, and a 5th one in Bo Melton that I think are going to be great targets for Jordan Love. And so you got Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Dontayvion Wicks, Romeo Doubs, and Bo Melton. Listen, between Wicks, Dobbs, Watson, and Reed, any 4 of those guys could be the number 1 receiver this year. And he may be a little bit low on this list right now, but he has the potential to definitely climb up. Plus, he had 4 touchdowns last year. So this is a guy that you got to keep an eye on. I definitely think he should be drafted on a team. That's just my opinion, because he if he doesn't get drafted, I think he's definitely going to be a waiver wire target for teams. But I can definitely see Jordan Love looking at this guy in the red zone more this year. And again, they've got an outstanding young group of receivers there in Green Bay, and if they all stay healthy, listen, Green Bay is going to be tough.
And I think it's really tough to judge who's going to be the true wide receiver one, even two or three in this offense. So I think we are just kind of making an educated guess on all four of these guys. Like I think any four of them really could be where we have their other teammates ranked within our whole list, which you'll see in the upcoming streams. But for me, I think Wicks is probably going to be that four guy on this offense. That's kind of why I ranked him where I did. And I think Dobbs, Watson, if Watson can stay healthy, and Reed all have the upper hand on him right now. But that doesn't mean he can't be sitting there at a wide receiver three above Watson.
Well, and Watson's
Dobbs,
got a history of injuries,
yeah.
and so you just never know, if this guy, jumps in and stuff. So it'll be interesting.
I agree with you though. Like I think of those four, all four of those wide receivers from Green Bay should be drafted. You never know when one's gonna pop off. Or if Christian Watson gets hurt, you might even have a possible flex option in Wicks. Heck, he could even be the wide receiver too if Watson got hurt, or he might even just come out and be the wide receiver two anyways on that team. So I think taking a chance on any of the Green Bay receivers is going to pay off.
Somewhere in the season.
Yeah, somewhere in the season, or even just having them there in case someone gets hurt, because that's just more targets then. And then our last one on this column, Tyler Boyd of the Titans.
Yeah, so I like Tyler Boyd. He's getting up there in age, but he was consistent with the Bengals all the years he's been there. I mean, hell, he had a couple, 1,000-yard years with the Bengals, a couple 800. He had 2 years over 800 yards. Last year, he had 98 targets on 67 receptions. That's why the Titans went out and got him. Now, the Titans receiving corps is kind of old.
And, all of them like 29 plus.
But here's what I'll say. With the fact that Hopkins has got a knee injury and they're projecting him out 4 to 6 weeks, and he could potentially, end up on the pub at the beginning of the season, who knows? So he could miss as many as 4 games. Maybe he doesn't miss any. Who knows? It's early to tell. You got to keep your eye on this. I think Boyd is one of those guys that could be a riser on the rankings based on what keeps coming out on Hopkins as we get further along in training camp. So he's definitely someone that should be drafted in regards to having him on the bench, given that Hopkins is dealing with a knee injury. Because those knee injuries, first they start off 4 to 6 weeks, then you find them on the pub, and then before you know it, it can be longer. Hopkins isn't a spring chicken anymore, and stuff. So, Hopkins is 32 years old. So, granted, Hopkins surprised people last year with how productive he was in the Titans. Now that King Henry is gone, I think the Titans offense is going to go through a transformation. So I don't think it's going to be as conservative as it's been in the years past. So definitely Boyd is a late round draft pick. Is he someone that you're going to pop in right away? Probably not. But he's someone that you got to keep your eye open on, because he can jump up in the rankings given what's going on with with Hopkins. Treylon Burks, I keep seeing the coaching staff there says, I don't think they're high on him for some reason. So I don't see anybody on their depth chart that's going to really, challenge Boyd for that wide receiver 3 spot.
And I might even have a little bit of a hot take here. Even if Hopkins is fully healthy, you might even see Tyler Boyd being that wide receiver too, still, because looking at his numbers, he's always kind of been like consistent, but he's also been kind of like a touchdown guy as well, outside of like 2 or 3 years there. So I don't know. He could potentially hop, but you never know. They like you said, they have an old receiving core. I think Tyler Boyd of their top three receivers might be the youngest. Him and Ridley are the same age at 29.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you have 29, 29, and 32. So at any point, any one of those three guys could get hurt and basically be done.
yeah. So just someone you got to keep your eye open and see. So
Moving on. Luke McCaffrey of the Commanders, right?
yeah, boy, I tell you what, um, Luke is another. He's another wide receiver from this rookie class that really intrigues me. Everybody knows his brother, and Christian McCaffrey, CMC. Uh, his dad was a great receiver, consistent receiver for Denver for years and years. Uh, and right now, Luke is listed as the wide receiver 3, which doesn't surprise me on the depth chart with the Chargers. To me, he's another sleeper, another deep sleeper. I would say. I would keep your eyes open on this guy. I don't know how the coaching staff feels about Jahan Dotson. McCaffrey could leap him. He comes from a bloodline family of football. It would not surprise me if he's uh, active in this offense. I had him ranked a little bit higher at 65 because I got a good feeling about him, and I could see him, later in the year showing out, in this Washington offense. The reason I ranked him where I did though is because you got a rookie quarterback in Daniels, you got a new coaching staff there, so I think that they're definitely going to spread the ball around. He is behind McLaurin and Dotson, so he's going to have to show out to move above them. But I definitely think that he's a young talent. You got to keep your eye on, just like I talked about Mitchell and with the Colts. He's another one of these rookies in this class that I think is going to surprise people.
Yeah, for me, McCaffrey kind of gets lost in the sauce. Just looking at like the depth chart, you have McLaurin, you have Dotson, and then you have Sinnett and Ertz as your tight ends. But on top of that, you also have Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler, both receiving running backs. So like the reason I ranked him as low as I did is because I just kind of see him getting lost there with how many guys on that team receive the ball quite a bit. And to me, he's probably sitting there like even behind running backs a little bit, probably at like the 5 or 6 guy there as an option. But that's just me personally.
We'll see.
Moving on, Rashod Bateman.
Yeah, so Bateman, I think we were pretty close on him. Um, Bateman's another guy that has potential to move up in the rankings. Bateman's biggest issue, last year he finally had a season where he was out there, 16 games. He probably missed out on the last game because of playoffs and stuff. The 2 years before, though, he was hurt. I know quite a bit about him because he was, a Golden Gopher for Minnesota. So I followed him with the Gophers. This guy has definitely got a lot of talent. If he stays healthy, I think that he's definitely going to be their wide receiver 2 behind Zay Flowers. My problem with Bateman and the reason I have him ranked here is that until I see more consistency of uh, Lamar going to his receivers than actually going to Mark Andrews. I always am a little bit hesitant, on drafting a Ravens receiver because you just don't know how many targets they're actually going to get. But I definitely think Bateman has a lot of talent, and he's got potential to, climb up the list, depending on, you know, you know, if Lamar targets him more this year.
Yeah, their receiving core is always harder to judge, just especially since drafting Lamar. Like it'd be different if Flacco was still like out there playing quarterback, because Flacco actually utilized his receivers quite a bit more. But Lamar can run the ball. You got Derrick Henry, so you're probably going to run the ball a little bit more this year. Zay Flowers is going to be your clear cut one receiver, and then you have one of the best tight ends in the league on the team, so he's going to get a lot of targets. I think.
Not to mention that they've got a really good backup tight end.
Yeah, and likely.
I mean,
so
likely is he likely would be a starter on any other team.
And then you still have Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell as well as your receiving running back. So it's gonna be hard to place Bateman any higher just because there's just a lack of production there for him.
Yeah,
He'd be better off on a different team.
He's definitely draftable though, to have on the bench just to see, because I do think that he has the potential to move up the rankings based on how he fits into the offense.
True, and if Zay Flower gets hurt, he's the number one receiver on the team, so it wouldn't hurt to draft him just to have him sit there. And he's a bench player at best, so none of these players are going to hurt to draft if you have a gut feeling about them. KJ Osborn.
Listen, you guys know I'm a huge Vikings fan from Minnesota. Love the Vikings. I was really disappointed the Vikings didn't keep KJ Osborn. I think that he is probably one of the most underrated receivers in the league. Granted, last year he didn't have as good a year as he did the year before, which was a little bit surprising given the fact that Jefferson was out, 4 or 5 games, I believe. So I think that might have hurt him a little bit. Everything that I'm seeing and coming out of the Patriots camp is that he's having a tremendous training camp. I'm a little surprised they got him on the depth chart here as low as they do. I do think that he's gonna ultimately end up being their he's definitely going to be on their roster, and I definitely think he's going to be one of their top 3 targets. I just can't see that he wouldn't be. But this all depends on Drake May, right, Wiggs?
Or whatever quarterback they start. I don't know. Drake May's been having a bad camp.
And I don't know what this coaching staff is going to do in regards to their offense. New England's kind of a mess. So to me, KJ, as much as I love him, he's a bench player at best right now until we see where all these players shake out. Because they got Jalen Reagor,
Demario Douglas.
They got Demario Douglas. They got Polk. They've got Gibson and Stevenson, and a rookie quarterback, along with Hunter Henry as their tight end. So I think it's really going to depend on what we see at the beginning of the season. So to me, KJ Osborn, you just got to keep an eye on to see, how he's using the offense. But definitely late round draft pick. If he, depending on how many receivers you want on your team.
Are they missing a receiver on here? Wasn't there a guy that got hurt last year that's not showing up?
No.
But yeah, Osborn's wide receiver 2, I think, on that team. I think Demario Douglas will have a pretty good year. He just needs to stay healthy. He had a solid year last year until he got hurt. So
yeah, he did. Oh, absolutely.
Troy Franklin.
Yeah, Troy Franklin. I was kind of hoping the Vikings might have looked at drafting this guy this year. Again, like I've said, I'm a big Vikings fan. I thought they could have got him in the late rounds. I was really shocked that they didn't. Really disappointed. Everything I've seen on this guy is good. He's 6'3", 180 pounds. But he's a rookie receiver. I think it's all going to depend on who they have at quarterback there. Denver drafted him because they drafted Nix, and I think they drafted Franklin because they wanted Nix to have a comfort level with a receiver since they drafted Nicks in the first round. So again, he's another one of these guys that I don't think he's going to have an immediate impact. It's all going to depend on how the quarterback situation shakes out in Denver, and I think that his impact, if any, is going to be middle to later in the year. Definitely somebody you can keep on the bench because given the Broncos' history at wide receiver, at any minute they could lose a receiver.
They could lose Sutton again or Patrick.
Um, uh, I had him ranked higher than Mims just for the fact that I think if Bo Nix is the starter, I could definitely see Franklin leapfrogging some of these other guys. And actually, I think they have him as their number 2 on the depth chart. So, behind Sutton and just above Mims. So that's kind of how that shook out.
I think it'll kind of be like Jalen Hurts to Smith type deal right away, where he's throwing to his college receiver over and over again.
I think it all depends on if Nix wins the starting job.
That's true.
I've heard that. Who's their backup there? The Jets guy,
Darnell or Wilson.
Yeah, I've heard they got Strahan and Wilson. I heard Wilson's been having a decent camp for him, so it's hard to know what Sean Payton's going to do there. So I think it all depends on who shakes out as the quarterback.
That's fair. Darnell Mooney of the Atlanta Falcons.
Listen, Wiggs and I, this is a big debate, and I think we're probably going to have to do a separate video on this guy. We could probably spend a good 15 minutes talking about this right now because Wiggs is convinced that Mooney's going to have a huge year with Kirk Cousins. I'm not so convinced that he is, but he's proven him. He had a 1,000-yard season with the Bears. He's been around, and then his rookie year he had 600 yards, over 600 yards with the Bears. Last year he had kind of a down year. Same with the year before that. He only had 31 and 40 receptions. Who knows with Kirk Cousins? I think that he's going to have competition with Rondell Moore. I also think that Kyle Pitts is going to have a bigger role in their offense this year because Kyle Pitts is a freak, and they're going to line him up as receiver and stuff as well. But I'm going to turn this one over to Wiggs because he's probably got more to say than me.
Here's all I got to say. Kirk Cousins threw to how many different guys last year and had a lot of yards behind him. He had JJ, Addison, and Hawkinson. What's he got now in Atlanta? He's got London, Mooney, and Pitts. Like, that's enough said right there. Like, Mooney's going to have a good year, and the year he had 1,000 receiving yards, which was with a quarterback in Mitch Trubisky. So, I think that's a major upgrade there. I don't even count that 2022 season because the Bears did nothing to help Fields out at all. And Fields was running around with his head cut off like 90% of the time in that season. And then he was the second string receiver to DJ Moore last year, which he didn't have a Fields out there on the field the entire year. He had a backup quarterback. I don't know. My hot take is Darnell Mooney is easily going to beat out Rondale Moore. And he's going to put up a good 800 to 900 yards here on this team. Drake London will have a good 13 to 14, and Kyle Pitts will have another like 800 to 900.
Yeah, and I disagree, but we can have a separate conversation on that, and we'll see how it shakes out. He's definitely a guy that needs to be on a roster. I will say that. But until I see where he fits into the offense and stuff, he's nothing more to me right now as a bench player.
And here's the thing: Drake London gets hurt. There's your wide receiver 1.
We can agree on that.
Demario Douglas.
Yeah, we kind of touched on him a little bit. I think Douglas's production is all going to be based on, how Drake May comes out this year. Last year, Douglas missed, 3 games. He had 49 receptions, 561 yards. I don't know. He's their wide receiver 1 on their depth chart. I'm not really high on him or most of the Patriots except for maybe Stevenson because I think Stevenson could have a good year at running back. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. And they also got what's his name on pub, Kendrick
Kendrick
Bourne.
Bourne, that's who it was.
Kendrick Bourne, could dip into his production, but I think it just it just all depends. And to me, Douglas definitely is draftable. I wouldn't plug him in anywhere else, and he's definitely a bench player at best right now until you see where he fits into the offense and how the Patriots shake out.
Yeah, my opinion on any of the Patriots receivers, you're taking a chance with any single one of them. Um, at best, they're going to be on your bench, and you just got to hope you get the one receiver of that team that's going to pop off this year because it's a struggle to determine who's going to be that one guy. Even the two or three, you still have Juju Smith-Schuster and a few others on the team, so it's like we don't know what we're going to get out of it. So any one of those receivers is bench player at best at the start of the season. You should not start any of those guys, in my opinion.
Right, I agree.
I believe that is Legette, if I'm not mistaken. Xavier Legette.
Yeah, so Xavier Legette again. Here's another rookie receiver drafted by um,
Panthers.
the Panthers. 6'3", 227 pounds. They're really high on this guy. I know he's kind of dealing with a little bit of a lower leg injury right now, but they're saying it's nothing serious. I don't think it's going to keep him out of anything. They've got him listed right now as their wide receiver 2 on their depth chart, above Adam Thielen. I don't know if I agree with that or not. Here's what I will say. I think Johnson, Legette, and Thielen both or all three of those guys have legitimate shots based on their depth chart of receivers right now. Of all of them having a decent season, I think it all just depends on uh, you know who Bryce Young has a bigger connection with. Me personally, I think that Deontay Johnson is probably going to have a rebound year this year, and then I think Thielen's going to be probably behind him. And then we get, to me, is it going to be probably the third in targets on their receiving core. I definitely think he's draftable. He's one of those rookies that, again, this was a really deep class for rookie wide receivers, and any of these rookie wide receivers could come out and have a Puka type year. Yep. You just don't know. So I definitely feel like he definitely should be on a roster. You got to draft him later in the draft. He's probably not going to be a flex option right away. He's one of those guys that you're going to have to sit on your bench, and as the season goes on, you're going to see where he shakes out in the offense.
Yeah, and I think it benefits him being drafted to this team. And I know you've brought this up quite a bit with someone like Deontay, but you have Adam Thielen as a veteran on the team. He's going to help guide you in the right direction. Thielen just wants to win. He doesn't put his ego in play, like out there, like wanting the ball like some of these guys do. He wants to win games and he wants to help those underneath him. And we've seen that time and time again from Stephon Diggs to Justin Jefferson. Now it's going to be Deontay Johnson and Xavier Legette this year, and even Jonathan Mingo. So I think any one of those receivers there can benefit from a veteran like Adam Thielen, and Legette could go out there and have a pretty solid
And depending
year.
on how he does, I keep hearing buzz about, Thielen could be a trade candidate if they wanted to free up some cap space. I don't know if that's true or not. I keep seeing that. I keep reading some things about that. Because some of these teams want to reduce some of their salary cap. If they end up for some reason loving Legette and want to free up some cap space and get a draft pick or something for Adam Thielen, that's going to change where he ranks.
Yep. I think he goes up quite a bit.
So you keep that in mind as you're watching throughout training camp and all the news that comes up.
And like I said, we'll be updating stuff on Twitter. We might even update it a few times before the season starts. So be prepared for a little minor changes to our list and whatnot. So we've already done it with the quarterbacks, expected for the running backs and receivers when we get that posted. But if Adam Thielen did get hurt too, if he's stuck on the team, Legette's a nice one to have on the bench because there's your wide receiver too. Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, I like Brian Thomas Jr. I think that he's I'm just waiting for my information to come up here. He was the second best receiver on LSU last year with Jaden Daniels and I believe it was Neighbors, right? Yep. That was on LSU. 6'3", 209 pounds. I just don't know that he has necessarily went to the best situation from a wide receiver perspective. I do think that he has the ability, based on their receivers on the Jaguars, of leaping up and stuff. And he's another one of these rookies that I could see climbing up in the rankings. I actually had him a little bit higher because I could see him bouncing up a little bit higher, and he could overtake Christian Kirk as their number one target guy. But it's hard to say because they also got Ingram at their tight end, who they like to line up in the slot and different positions on the line as well. But keep an eye on Brian Thomas. He's definitely, again, another rookie that has to be drafted on a team. He shouldn't. I mean, this guy needs to be on people's benches because as the season emerges and you see where these rookies are panning out in the offenses, again, this is a guy that could turn out to be a puka.
Yeah, and for me, like I have him at the wide receiver 3 on this team at least to start the year. I think he will be behind both Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis, but I could totally see him being the wide receiver 2, passing up Gabe Davis. Maybe wide receiver 1. It all kind of just it's all determined by how Trevor Lawrence plays this year. I'm not sold on Lawrence, so it really just comes down to that for me. And I don't think any of these receivers are really going to have crazy success.
Definitely lower round draft pick on your bench type guy and wait and see.
Plus, Kirk has an injury history, so at any point, this guy could jump up and be putting up good points for you. He could be higher up on the list. Tyler Lockett.
Lockett's interesting. He's 31, but God, this guy just finds a way to produce every year. 122 targets last year, 79 receptions. He didn't have as good a year as the previous 4 years, yardage wise, but 4 years before last year, he was over 1,000 yards. This guy is just consistent, and so he's definitely got to be on a team. He's currently listed number 2 on their depth chart. JSN may take over. Jason Smith, Najaba may take over. Given his age, but he's just consistent. So you definitely need to draft this guy. He needs to be on your bench. You need to just kind of wait and see how he plays out. I will say this about Lockett. He is one of those guys that's very frustrating in a fantasy football season because one game he can have 20 yards and the next game he can have 150 and 2 touchdowns. So he's one of those guys that has the ability to break off. His touchdowns each year is a little deceiving because he usually, when he gets touchdowns, it's usually multiple touchdowns
in the same game. So, yeah, that's kind of why I had him ranked a little bit lower. Like, yeah, he's averaged 8 touchdowns over a bulk of 6 years there, 7 years maybe, and yeah, his yards have been there. I think he'll be taking a step back this year. I think JSN is going to be jumping him on the depth chart, and I still think Lockett will still probably get close to 100 targets. I think he'll probably receive around like 70 of those, but I don't think he's going to have like a ton of yards. I think he might be sitting at about the same touchdown wise, maybe a little less because I think JSN might take over some of that. But
yeah, he had 5 touchdowns last year, so we'll have to wait and see.
We might have him a little low, but I don't know. I just have this gut feeling that JSN is going to be taking over his wide receiver 2 role there. And Geno Smith is probably going to struggle this year as well. I think we talked about that yesterday on our own time. But to round it on off, I got Gabe Davis.
Yeah, Wiggs is a little bit higher on Gabe Davis than I am. Davis had a decent year in 2022. Last year, I believe he was hurt most of the year.
No, he played a bulk of it. It's not showing it, though.
Well, we don't need to. So, I'm not sure, what is. So, last year, he had 81 or 45 receptions and 748 yards and 7 touchdowns. So, I'm not as sold as on Gabe Davis. I think he was in a lot better situation in Buffalo than he is in Jacksonville. I think he took a step down at quarterback, obviously. I don't think his production is going to be that high this year. I could be wrong, but that's just my opinion. Again, he's definitely draftable, but I think you need to wait and see where he plays out in his new role with Jacksonville.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, this Jacksonville like team is just really hard to judge. So I want to go with my gut and say, oh yeah, he's gonna be perfectly fine, but I don't know. That I just have him slightly above Brian Thomas Jr., but that could kind of change as the season goes along. It's hard to judge right now, and I'm not a Lawrence fan, so I don't think it'll be a good season for either of those guys personally.
Oh, I agree. Well, that ends this round for our receiving 61 through 80. We hope you guys find this information useful. Uh, we definitely appreciate everybody that's watching. Check us out on our YouTube channel at Fantasy Fools PPR. Subscribe, like. We're also out on X, Snap, Instagram, TikTok. Please go check us out. Wiggs has been putting a lot of content out there. We hope you guys are finding it useful. And don't hesitate to give us feedback. We're open to it. We just hope you guys find this information useful.
And yeah, I think with that, we just sign on off. We'll be dropping another stream here in a few days on our next little bit of rankings. We'll do 2 more streams here of wide receivers, and then we're going to knock out one wide receiver or one tight end stream here as well. So, but soon enough, once these all get uploaded on our daily videos, we'll start getting into some other stuff. So be ready for some double uploads and a few other things. We got a lot coming your way.
Sounds great. Hey, we're signing off. Thanks, everybody.